Okay, great. So I'd
That was
like
for
to
the old guys in the room, sorry.
Thanks, Director Frisch. So I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District regular board meeting of Tuesday, May 12th, 2020 to order. And I'll start by acknowledging that most of the participants are on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And along with that, I'd like to read an article from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And today it's Article 9. Indigenous peoples and individuals have the right to belong to an Indigenous community or nation in accordance with the traditions and customs of the community or nation concerned. No discrimination of any kind may arise from the exercise of such a right. And next we have the in-camera recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. And that is that we adjourn to in camera at the end of this regular board meeting under section 91C, labor relations, and 91K, which is negotiations and related discussions respecting provision of regional district service. And are there any opposed to that motion? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we have a motion to amend the agenda so that we can bring forward item 5, the COVID action team report, because there are some people in the boardroom waiting to report on that.
I'll move that we vary the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any opposed to varying the agenda?
Can you bring your brother a granola bar too, please? Okay, drop your brother off a granola bar.
Somebody's not on mute.
And someone needs a granola bar, but
Can I have a granola bar?
All right, so hearing no opposition to varying of the agenda, that's carried. And we go to item 5. That's the COVID action teams. Can I get a first and second?
Move receipt.
second.
And I will pass it over to Russell Dyson.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And tonight we have members of the COVID Action Team present, and Reagan Jameson, who's our Sports Center Coordinator from the Recreation Service Department, is here to provide a report and to advise you on the progress of this initiative and answer any of your questions. Reagan.
Good afternoon. Through the chair to the directors, I'm happy to be here to report today. Along with me is Susan Bullock, the manager of recreation services for the sports and aquatic centers. Also on the team are Paige Batchelor, Teresa Warrens, Greg Beebe, Alan Jackson, and James Warren. The COVID action team was created to reach out to our local not-for-profit groups and associations as a way to explore opportunities in which the CVRD could potentially support them during this time. You can go. Sorry. We have never experienced a change in our way of life and business practices with such force and speed as we experienced in March. And while it is challenging, it also opens the door to opportunity. We have taken this opportunity to identify what local, provincial, and federal supports have been successful and supportive to our not-for-profit groups during this time. We've also taken this opportunity to identify unforeseen needs that have shown themselves as everyone tries to navigate the new norms. There are approximately 280 community groups and organizations within the regional district. The action team decided to begin with a smaller list for the initial callouts, but wanted to ensure that we were talking to a variety of service groups to obtain fair representation. We based our selection of organizations on the following criteria. We wanted to reach out to our local groups firsthand to maintain the relationships that we have already built with them. For example, we felt that it was important to reach out to the Comox Valley Farmers Market, as they not only are a customer of ours, they play a major role in our local food economy. We wanted to avoid duplicating services and assistance to one group while missing the needs of another group. We looked to the organizations that work directly with vulnerable populations within our area and what resources were impacted by COVID-19, such as food sourcing and what that looks like for our vulnerable populations. The results were quite similar for all of the groups that we contacted, and they were very thankful for the CVRD to be reaching out. Some of the reoccurring themes that we found are financial impacts, reduced staffing and volunteers, navigating the new norms and connection points, and reduced public profiles. Most groups reported that the grants and aids they usually receive have been very helpful, but it's the unforeseen impacts that they were not prepared for. Impacts such as the added cost of adding new technology and technology to assist with remote access and workspaces. Other groups that usually work with children and gather for recreation and learning are now struggling with the added financial costs of delivering individual packages of crafts and recreation items. The organizations reported the reduced staffing and volunteers is a major issue for them right now. Many of them rely heavily on volunteers to run and are finding that it has been hard to find enough people to run at full capacity. There's concerns over navigating physical distancing guidelines and creating new policies and or plans for reopening, as this is a large undertaking, especially with the lack of staff and volunteers. The results did highlight some potential connection points between organizations that maybe weren't thought of, and the team can use that to facilitate groups together to help each other out. Looking at the themes, we saw the opportunity to help right away. We initiated a call to action and volunteer for all CVRD employees last week by informing them of the need for volunteers in many areas, such as delivery, building, and community gardens. We've had a positive response and have been able to link staff together with organizations already. We have also placed a call out to the CVRD staff to collect items such as crafts and toys for the children's care packages. The organizations that have been involved will receive a follow-up letter detailing a summary of the investigation and further information on where to find reliable, detailed, and helpful information regarding COVID-19 and the new physical distancing guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further presenters for this?
That's it, just available for questions, Chair Keller.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I really appreciate that you've reached out to our community partners, and it's very important for us to know what's happening on the ground and to be able to best deploy our resources. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Maybe, oh yeah, there are some.
Yeah, I see 3 hands up. So Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to acknowledge how important this work is and how pleased I am to hear from the people who have been doing it. I serve on the board of a nonprofit organization that operates on the North Island, and I'm acutely aware of how challenging it has been for programs that offer youth and other community programs to operate during this time. And I think any assistance that has been provided here is, I'm sure, has been very much appreciated. So just lots of kudos to our staff and management for making this happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Morin.
Great, thank you. Yes, I obviously echo Director Hillian's comments, and I just really am thrilled with the creativity and with this initiative. And I would say that probably for staff, it's been very rewarding, I would think. And we know that in times of crisis and stress, kind of giving back or being able to feel like you're contributing and making someone else's life better can be really helpful. So I'm hoping that staff also is getting a lot out of being able to have the opportunity to do this. And thank you so much to everyone who's participated.
Thank you. Director Hamir.
Yeah, thank you. And also kudos to all the staff who've been involved. My question was around, you've done like an initial call out. Are we sort of maxed out in terms of the staff that are contributing to this initiative? Or do you think we might have another call out to some of the nonprofits that you weren't able to get in the first round?
Through the chair to the directors. We will be looking at meeting up after the report and the summary this week to come to a decision on what phase 2 of the action looks like, and if we're calling out to more nonprofit groups.
Great, thank you.
And Director Arbour.
Thank you. I would be interested if your committee deems it appropriate, if you require suggestion on some nonprofits or whatnot, you could there could be an email to the directors and requesting input, and I'd be happy to provide some. I'd be curious to see the list of who got contacted for sure, but that's at your discretion. Thank you so much for the work.
Thank you so much for the suggestion.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, is there anyone who is against receipt of the item?
There is Director Grieve, I think, may have his hand up.
Oh, thank you. I see that now. Director Grieve.
No, that's fine. I was just going to chime in and remind everybody that at one time, the Comox Valley won a national award for being the volunteer capital of Canada. So it's good to see that tradition continue. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director. Yes, we value the volunteerism in our community very much. So again, anyone opposed to receipt of the item? Seeing and hearing none, that's carried. And we'll go back to item 1. Oh, actually, item C on the agenda was the adoption of minutes for April 28th.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any comments or questions on the adoption of April 28th minutes? Anyone opposed to receipt of those minutes? Seeing and hearing none, that's carried. And we're on to reports. Item 1, Committee of the Whole for May 5th, receipt.
Move
Move
receipt.
receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on those minutes for May 5th? Oh, Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the board's information, I was unable to attend the first half of the meeting, and when I tried to log in, the meeting had been closed by the host. So unfortunately, I was not able to join the second half, and my apologies to the board for that.
Thanks for letting us know. Yep, there's been various technical difficulties along this journey, but we're glad you're here with us now. So anyone opposed to receipt of May 5th minutes? Hearing and seeing none, those are carried, and we're on to item 2, which is a reallocation request for function 451, the Connect Warming Center.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Russell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to introduce, Alana Mullally is here to introduce this request and answer any of your questions.
Good afternoon. Earlier this year, the board approved the updated 5-year plan for the Homelessness and Support Service, which included a $60,000 allocation to the Comox Valley Transition Society for use towards the establishment of a permanent drop-in center for folks experiencing homelessness and those who may be at risk of homelessness. In the meantime,
Could we up Alana's volume?
I don't want to spit on it. In the meantime, the coalition has been working with the city of Courtenay to secure space on Cliff Avenue for the establishment of our Connect Warming Center. And the Transition Society has invested their own dollars into modifications of that space to make it suitable for that use. So this recommendation is requesting that you allocate $10,000 of the overall 60 to reimburse the Transition Society for their expenditures in outfitting the warming center. Please note that the coalition's leadership team unanimously supports this reallocation. And Andrea Capelli, the coordinator for the coalition, is on the line. She's joining us today if you have any specific questions for Andrea. Thank you.
Thanks, Alana. And we're on receipt. Are there any questions about this report?
Very Chair, I didn't put my hand up, but I make a comment if that's okay.
Go ahead, Director Frisch.
Yeah, well, I guess I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the coalition for all their hard work and for helping us sort these matters out. Of course, we really rely on them and their expertise when figuring out where these resources should go. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that passes. And there's a
I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. And the recommendation is that $10,000 of the $60,000 allocated for the permanent drop-in center project in 2019 be reallocated to the Connect Warming Center. And finally, that the reallocation be reflected as an addendum to the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness 5-year action plan, which ranges from 2020 to 2024. And this is a vote that excludes Comox, as they do not pay the tax requisition for the homeless support service. Oh, Director Frisch, do you have another?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wonder if this would be an appropriate time to ask for a very brief update on what the long-term plans are for a permanent location, if that's possible, and if not, that's okay. We can get it another time.
I will refer that question to our CAO.
Andrea, would you be able to comment on that, please? We'll unmute you, Andrea.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so we definitely would like to continue on with the space that we currently have at 685 Cliff. We do have a lease agreement until the end of June 30th, and we will be connecting with the city on extending that lease. The Connect Warming Center, I mean, especially during the pandemic times, has acted as a really, really important resource for our communities most vulnerable. So it's really become a place where folks can get not only services, but educated on what's going on with COVID. And we still see about 40 to 50 people a day, which pre-pandemic we were seeing about 60. So that just goes to show the necessity of a space like that. So we're just going to continue to do what we can to either carry on at 685 in partnership with the city, or we will continue to search for other facilities or spaces to lease for a permanent center. We won't give up.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Are there any further questions or comments on the recommendation? Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to acknowledge for the record that although Comox isn't part of this service, they did recently allocate a contribution that I believe is going to housing in the Courtenay area that citizens from all over the valley may be able to take advantage of, and want to make sure that people know that they're taking those steps apart from this initiative. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Director Hillian. Yeah, that's important information, and they're just a different funding model than the other partners. So seeing no further questions, I'll go through the roll. Director Frisch,
In favor.
Director Morin,
In favor.
Director Cole Hamilton,
In favor?
Director Hillian,
In favor?
Director Arbor,
Yes.
Director Grieve,
In favor.
and Director Hamir.
In favor.
Thank you. It's carried unanimously. And we are on to item number 3, which is the living wage employer report.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Jake Martins will introduce this report and answer any of the board's questions.
Thank you, Russell. This report is being provided in response to a request of the Comox Valley Social Planning Council for the regional district to become a certified living wage employer. The Living Wage campaign is an initiative that seeks to address low wage poverty by encouraging employers to pay their workers a wage that's above the legislative minimum and that reflects the cost of living in a community. For the Comox Valley in 2019, the living wage was set at $15.97 compared to the legislative minimum, which is $13.85. The living wage is a regional calculation, so it reflects their estimation of what it costs to live in a community around the province, different communities around the province. To become a living wage employer, an organization must ensure that their direct staff and their service contractors all pay living wages to their employers. With the CVRD staff currently earning above the living wage, this report primarily considers the payment of living wages to all CVRD contractors and subcontractors. Through a cursory review of the regional district's contracts and with industry standards provided by the campaign and other similar local governments, an estimated increase of approximately about $25,000 to $50,000 has been provided. It is noted, however, that this would not be an initial increase that would all come at once, as contracts essentially would include that living wage provision as they are renewed. So it would be phased in over time. While bearing such increases in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic may seem counterintuitive, it is noted that the increases would go directly to individuals in what can be termed low wage positions to provide them with greater economic security. So in an effort to strike a balance between these considerations, staff are recommending an amendment to the regional district's procurement policy to incorporate the provision of living wages into the evaluation framework for competitive procurements. You can note this on the attached procurement policy in the sustainable procurement section, which provides for 3 different sections that include environmental responsibility, ethical responsibility, and social value. It's acknowledged that these provisions are currently being piloted by the regional district and once realized sort of to their full scope, it's estimated that such considerations could be included in about 75% of the regional district's procurements. This approach of amending the policy as opposed to going to full certification provides the regional district with increased control respecting these increases. It also provides flexibilities to the contractors to consider a variety of social value factors. It doesn't require that the living rate, or wouldn't require that living wages be incorporated, but is an option for them to consider amongst a suite of potential contributions. And finally, it also has the potential for minor reduced administrative savings in comparison to a full certification with the campaign. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jake. Are there any questions? Director Arbor.
Yeah, I like the recommendation from staff. I think the months change things a little bit, doesn't it? We've got millions of unemployed right now and totally different context. So, but at the end of the day, is what principles do we want to live by? And I think to not seek certification, but rather to incorporate it into our procurement policy, I think shows intent, but also can give a little bit of flexibility if there's other arrangements, as Jake described. So I'm supportive of the report and the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Hamir.
I just want to clarify. So if we include the living wage just in our procurement policy, that precludes us from being certified. Is that what I understand?
Thank you, and through the chair. I wouldn't necessarily say it precludes us fully from being certified. In my conversations with the Living Wage campaign, they were certainly very open to discussing our arrangements here. Certainly the requirement to provide living wages to all staff and contractors is a core part of that program. But yeah, I couldn't say at this point that it automatically eliminates us, and they do have different levels of recognition. And so perhaps this would put us at simply just a different level.
And what are we saving by not certifying? You said it was a minor administrative cost. Do you recall what that is?
Yeah, so it essentially, I think what we're looking at is vendor performance management, and one of certainly the concerns of staff is the time and resources it could take to ensure compliance when a contractor says they're going to pay those wages, and for us to go through the process essentially to verify that. We don't think that would be a major problem, and certainly the campaign and other local governments have expressed that isn't a major problem, but certainly from time to time it can come up. So with utilizing the procurement policy, I think our estimation is that essentially there just might be fewer contracts going out with that provision included. So therefore there might be a minor savings. Okay.
Because I mean, one of the things about being a living wage employer is the fact that you can set, I only know one or two living wage employers in the Valley that advertise themselves as being such. And I think it sets a standard, and we provide some leadership in what we want to see in the Valley. So I think it would be a shame to not have that sort of, even if it's a lower level of certification. I believe Saanich Regional District, or the city of Saanich, is a living wage employer. I think it does make a difference for us to have that as part of our, how we describe ourselves. So for me, that is an important piece, but I'd be interested in hearing what the other members of the board feel, if that's important enough to go after.
Thanks, Director Hamir. Yeah, I think that we are setting an example by paying a living wage within our own corporate operations and to our own employees. And I think we are also setting an example by including it in the social aspect of our procurement policy. So it shows that we are working toward a certification, and maybe it turns out that if we take this next step, that it's not as onerous to go through the contractors, and because maybe they seeing our interest in having hiring living wage employers, that they would advertise that and themselves, so that it would be easily identifiable for us and not difficult for us to check their backgrounds on those companies. Any further comments or questions? Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a point of interest, I learned today that one of our major contractors, the Economic Development Society, actually is a living wage employer based on the wages that they pay, which are start at the $16 an hour range for some of their staff. But apart from that, I just wanted to be clear on the points that Director Hamir raised, because the resolution, or in the options section of the report, it speaks to the board passing a resolution, a statement of if you like, that we are a living wage employer versus at the actual certification. And I'm just wondering if staff could comment on the distinction between the two.
Yeah, I think that option reflects that essentially the organization could, or the board could take the position that we're willing to essentially state that we are a living wage employer for our direct staff, but just not make that statement to extend to all of our contractors and subcontractors. So yeah, it's an option, but again, I don't think that's achieving the full intent of what the living wage campaign is seeking.
Okay, thanks.
Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think in a valley where the majority of the people are working in the service sector, they're working in the gig economy, the vast majority of them are making barely over the minimum wage. I don't think there's anybody here that thinks that local government is not paying a living wage. Thank you.
Thanks. Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I definitely take Director Hamir's point that it sends the signal. I think perhaps at this point, though, given what we're facing with COVID and the discussions we'll be having later on, both finances and staff capacity are something which we're a little uncertain about at this point. I think this is a strong commitment for now, and I'd like to see perhaps us review this when the seas are a bit smoother and we have a bit of a greater sense of where we stand. But I'd like to see that as the goal of becoming a certified living wage employer be something which is a longer term goal. But I see this as a strong step, and probably the strongest step we can sustainably take at this point to move towards that.
Thank you for your comments. And any further comments or questions? We're on receipt. And is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing and hearing none, that's carried. And there's a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded.
Thank you. And the recommendation is that staff be directed to bring forward an amendment to the Comox Valley Regional District procurement policy to include the provision of living wages as part of the sustainability factors for best value of procurements. And further, that the proposed amendment be considered for referral to the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board for feedback prior to consideration of adoption of the Comox Valley Regional District Board. And I'll go through the roll. Director Frisch.
In favor.
Director Morin.
In favor.
Director Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Director Hillian.
In favor.
Director Grant.
In favor.
Thank you. Director Swift.
In favor.
Director Arbor.
Yeah.
Director Grieve.
In favor.
Director Hamir.
In favor.
And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And we're on to item 4, the carbon neutral update. And I believe we have a speaker for this. Well, Russell, are you going to introduce?
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Directors. And yes, Brianne Lovute is on the line and she will introduce this report. This is an annual report we bring forward for your consideration and direction. So Brianne will answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell. Through the chair to the directors. The CVRD is a signatory of the British Columbia Climate Action Charter and has been carbon neutral in our operations since 2012. Carbon neutrality is achieved through a combination of energy efficiency improvements, but also the purchase of verified carbon offsets. Each year, the CVRD does publicly report on our corporate emissions as part of our participation in the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program. This is a conditional grant program through the province that provides signatories of the Climate Action Charter with funding to the equivalent of 100% of the carbon tax that we pay each year. So for context, that would be approximately just over $60,000 for our 2019 carbon taxes we paid. 2019 corporate emissions resulted in about 2,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which was slightly less than 2018. A majority of the emissions continue to come from the same source, and that's our recreation facilities' use of natural gas. Then also some emissions associated predominantly with solid waste. An update to the corporate energy plan is tentatively scheduled for fall of 2020. This update would be examining the actions that have been taken since 2011 when that corporate energy plan was created, and what some of our operational changes have been and increases in greenhouse gas emissions and where we could look at reducing some of those emissions. CVRD departments that cause greenhouse gas emissions allocate funds every year through their budgeting process to contribute to corporate carbon neutrality. So the budget to offset 2019 emissions was just over $51,000. And that number is determined by what we think the emissions is going to be, and then $25 a ton, which is an average cost of a Canadian offset. So the proposal to spend this just over $51,000 for this year would be, first we'd be looking at meeting our requirements under the charter. So that would be purchasing the carbon offsets. And the exact number is 1,993 tons that we would be purchasing. And staff are recommending a Canadian offset project this year called the Thermal Residential Heating Aggregation Project. And so the cost of that would be approximately $19,930. And we would report back to the board in the coming months with more information about how we'd spend the remainder of those budgeted funds. Right now, we are exploring some options for a community granting program and working on an expression of interest to see what the capacity in the community might be for that. So that's why we didn't want to report out on it right away. I did want to note that the past practice over the last few years has been to purchase cheap international offsets. And I think that was predominantly because the Canadian offsets were really quite expensive. Staff is recommending supporting a Canadian project this year. And it's a relatively affordable option at $10 per metric ton. The project, just to tell you a little bit more about it, it replaces conventional residential fossil fuel combustion heating with solar heating systems at residential and commercial pools across Canada. The Canadian offset market is relatively small, and one benefit certainly to choosing a Canadian offset project is it does help us profile and support climate action in Canada. And we're of the opinion there would still be sufficient funds remaining in the CVRD budget to also support local projects as well, hopefully through that community granting program. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the directors have.
Thank you, Brianne. And yes, we have a list of directors that are wanting to ask questions, starting with Director Frisch.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Well, thanks for the report, and I'm really encouraged to see that we are spending these dollars in Canada on this project, so that's really great. I sort of have this thought that because this is a corporate plan, it probably doesn't include personal transportation to and from work. Would that be correct?
That is correct. So the reporting that we have to do as part of this grant program is merely on corporate emissions, so certainly on our fleet vehicles, but it wouldn't include any community emissions, so residential heat sources or personal vehicle use.
Sure. And so at the City of Courtenay right now, you're probably mostly all aware that we are redoing our official community plan, and it's got a climate change lens on it. It's pretty progressive plan that we're putting together. And one of the things that we've recently learned, and probably everyone knows, is that transportation is actually the biggest greenhouse gas producer in the valley, for the valley. And so if we could find a way to get people walking and taking the bus and riding to work, in our corporation here at the CVRD, it would be actually a big help. And so happy to see that part 2 of this recommendation is looking at community granting program, and also if we could put our minds to changing our own practices, that would be extremely helpful. Not much of a question, but thanks for listening.
Thanks, Director Frisch. Director Hamir.
Yeah, not a question either, but just wanted to show my support for moving some of these carbon purchases closer into Canada, and hopefully as we progress even to Vancouver Island, that would be great to see. So fully support where staff are going with this.
Great, Director Arbour.
Thank you. One of my funniest vote at the waste management around carbon credits was, I forget his name, but it was just me and another director that voted against the carbon credit. But he's a director that doesn't believe at all in climate change and thinks this carbon credit is all, and then there was me who voted against. My eye turns to your comment around, because I believe that and at the time the issue was, should we buy carbon credits or reduce our methane emissions, which had a slightly higher cost. But I'm the same here. I think I still want to see a plan that weans us off carbon credits. So when I hear that, and as chair of the Sports Commission, that natural gas may be one of our driver around emissions, I'd love to start thinking about how to eliminate that emission to begin with. And another thing that we've raised and we keep kicking down the road is our how aggressive we are around our vehicle fleet policy and trying to transfer that as fast as possible to electric or at least non-petroleum options. So I'm very interested in looking at, and like Director Frisch said, around how we transport ourselves as staff and as employees and directors of the district. So I think I will ask more questions about the breakdown of our corporate emissions. And if it's true that natural gas is such a driver, I think I'll want to start looking at what are the options to start eliminating, even if it's a 10 or 15-year plan, at least that I feel that we're in a direction that may bring us to carbon neutral in a real way rather than relying on credits elsewhere. Thank you.
Good points. Thank you. Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the report. This was really interesting to read, and I would echo the comments. I think it was Director Hamir is saying it was nice to see our offsets come back on shore to Canadian soil, and I think the community granting program is interesting to look at, seeing what options there are locally. I know there's, I think it's called Cowichan Energy Alternatives, which is a Vancouver Island-based carbon credit exchange. Is that something that you looked into when you were pricing options at all? And I guess another comment is, I know that we made a substantial contribution to the Coal Beach property for Cumberland Community Forest, and I'm wondering if there's any possibility that that effort to preserve forest land could be considered as part of our carbon credits.
Yeah, absolutely, through the chair. So in order to meet our requirements to get the refund for the carbon tax, we do have to buy verified carbon offsets. So that does limit us in a way. So that's why we ended up contacting 2 of the Canadian offset brokers. So that would preclude reaching out to Cowichan because most of their projects aren't verified. But certainly that's where there's opportunities through a local community granting program, because we're not held to these same stringent standards that we have to meet. So we're able to develop criteria of what kind of projects we may want to fund. And certainly forest restoration or preservation is a really great local level project to invest in. So that's where I kind of see the difference between the two. One is to meet provincial requirements. It's very stringent which kind of offsets we can choose. And then if we spend some money at the local level, we can have that added flexibility.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to make one quick comment in relation to what Director Arbour said in terms of natural gas. I was wondering if we'd looked into the renewable natural gas service that Fortis BC offers, where it's reclaimed landfill gas, et cetera, that goes into the system and you pay a premium for. Is that something we've reviewed as an option?
Not that I'm aware of, and a lot of that review would definitely occur through that corporate energy plan. So when that plan was created in 2011, it only projected out kind of things we could do until 2015. And so that's why the update will be quite important. And just so the directors are aware, there was already money allocated in 2017 to put towards updating that plan. But with the build of the new office and everything, that department was quite busy. So they are hoping to do that update in this fall. And that would look at all our different facilities and truly where the opportunities are. And with the recreation facility being the biggest emitter, that would certainly be one of the options I imagine would be explored.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, an update of the corporate energy plan, I think, will be pretty important to guide our decisions moving forward. Director Grieve.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would suggest that these concepts have one foot in the past. I think there's been a paradigm shift already. If you look just to the past couple of months, here we are, we're meeting on Zoom. This is happening all over the world. This is happening at corporate level, government level, everywhere. It eliminates people having to jump in airplanes, get a hotel room, jump in their cars, fill up their gas tanks. This is huge. If this becomes a new normal, we're going to see a big shift in the next year or so. We've already seen a huge shift in the last few months. So I would just suggest that we're entering into a totally uncharted territory when it comes to this. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grieve. Any further comments? We are still on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And there's recommendation 1.
Move recommendation 1.
Second.
Thank you. And recommendation 1 is that the Comox Valley Regional District achieve carbon neutrality for 2019 with the purchase of 1,993 metric tons of verified carbon offsets from the Canada-wide Thermal Residential Heating Aggregation Project at a cost of $10 Canadian per metric ton, totaling approximately 19,930 Canadian dollars. And I'll go through the roll for this. Director Frisch.
In favor.
Director Morin.
In favor.
Director Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Director Hillian.
In favor.
Director Grant.
In favor.
Director Swift.
In favor.
Director Arbor.
On principle, opposed.
Opposed?
Yep.
Director Grieve.
I guess I'm in favor. Thank you.
And Director Hamir.
In favor.
Thank you, and that's carried. And we're on to recommendation 2.
Move to.
Second.
And that recommendation is that staff continue to explore the development of a climate action community granting program for the remaining 2019 carbon offset funds of approximately $31,170 and report back to the board with recommendations. And Director Hillian, do you have a comment, question?
I do. Thanks, Chair. Pardon my ignorance in these matters, but can anybody explain what it would take for an organization like the Cumberland Forest Society to become eligible for this type of process?
I can
May I
comment as
comment?
a director, but okay, go ahead.
Through the chair. So the first step really in developing that program would be getting a really good community partner on board that could help administer the grants themselves. So preferably an organization that's relatively in touch with what's going on in the community. And then with the CVRD, we collaboratively maybe create some criteria for what kind of projects. So it came up earlier as well. I think certainly that forest restoration or preservation projects are considered legitimate ways to reduce carbon footprint. So that could be something that we could explore.
Yeah, and just to comment, we did just talk about this at our last council meeting with the village And the Community Forest Society had reported to us before that it was quite a difficult process to undergo to get certified. However, I know that Quadra Island has a similar project that they have got approved. So it's not impossible, but I think that maybe the Forest Society in Cumberland just doesn't have the resources at this time to take that on. Director Arbor, do you still have a comment or question?
Yeah, I was part of the team that put together the Whistler Chickamus Community Forest Carbon Project, and scale matters, you know. So the project development cost for that one was probably about 125,000. We ended up selling it all to Whistler at 30 bucks a ton. But you need some scale in terms of your restoration or your improved forest management practices. So I'm not sure that a project of that scale would warrant the level of effort in actually developing the actual credit. Quadra was a little bit bigger than what Perseverance is looking at, but that's definitely a consideration, just the cost of building the project.
Thank you.
Director Frisch.
Well, this is half a joke, but half serious. Maybe what we need to do is buy our employees bicycles and sweaters.
I'd like a free bike. All right, so where are we at? We're on recommendation 2, I believe. Is that right, Jake?
That's correct.
And we've got a first and second for that?
Yep.
Okay. So seeing no further hands up, I will go through the roll. Director Frisch?
Absolutely in favor.
Director Morin?
In favor.
Director Cole-Hamilton?
In favor.
Director Hillian?
In favor?
Director Grant?
In favor.
Director Swift?
In favor.
Director Arbor?
Opposed?
Thank you. Director Grieve?
Well, my right hand just got itchy, so I think we're going to be receiving money from this in not too distant future. So I'm in favor.
Okay, and Director Hamir?
On that recommendation, how can I not? In favor.
And so that was 1 opposed, Jake, Director Arbor, and that carries. And we've already done item 5. So we're on to bylaws and resolutions for final adoption. And item 1 is bylaw number 593, the Rural Comox Valley Zoning Bylaw 520, 2019, Amendment 1, Wilfred Road.
Move adoption.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second that.
Thank you. And are there any comments or questions? Oh, Director Hamir. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. Thanks for allowing me to speak. So I'm going back to my notes from the public hearing for this amendment. And although, staff and the proponent did put together a project indicating that they had checked a lot of the boxes, just the general feedback from the community was that this site was a very wet site, which was in direct contrast to what the proponent claimed. And, normally I would, have a look at what, the reports that were attached from the proponent's hired staff. But I'm looking at the photos of the site. I'm leaning towards not supporting the adoption of this amendment, just because of the worries around the environmental impact that densification of this site will encourage. So I'm not going to be supporting the adoption. And I would hope that staff would be able to work with the proponent to either have less density or mitigate some of the water issues on that site.
Thank you, Director. I see all the area directors have their hands up. So Director Arbor, you're next.
Thank you. Question to staff. This is the site that is also on the BCOB system, or am I looking at a different property here?
Yeah, yes, it would be serviced by water from the Black Creek Oyster Bay water system. And
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry to cut you off, Russell, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't have the two different applications mixed up in my mind. No, I remember the public hearing quite well, and I agree that a lot of concerns were expressed. This is a property about to be subdivided, and there were two concerns. Was the water on site, and the other was adding connections. I understand that there's good progress being made on the BCOB water system with consideration of the third well and the Watutko system coming online. This was actually at a meeting yesterday, so that seems very hopeful around a systemic solution. So I think that was a main concern of the public hearing that I believe is starting to be addressed. And second, I know the public perception, but based on the the hydrology reports and all that, I'm still satisfied that it was professionally done, and yeah, so I remain in favor of the amendment.
Okay, Director Grieve.
Well, thank you very much. I would turn everybody's mind back to that public hearing. And at the time, it was a torrential downpour. And I don't think anybody didn't have some standing water in their backyard. So given the fact that the proponent had lived on the property for 30 years, and also the fact that the Saratoga Miracle Beach Association had actually supported this site along with the area CAPC, I think it was just one of those times when it was a kind of a NIMBY response in a way, and I hate to say that, but we're talking about a park dedication as well in the north to preserve some of the actual wetlands that exist in the Saratoga Miracle Beach area. So I have no problem at all in supporting this, because I think it was extraordinary circumstances, the actual day that we had that public hearing as well. So thank you.
Okay. And this is a vote for final adoption, and it's a vote of the areas only. Are there any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll go through the roll. Director Arbor.
In favor.
Director Grieve.
In favor.
Director Hamir.
Against.
And Jake, that's carried.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And moving on, do we have any questions from the media today?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And I guess we will move into in camera.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed to moving in camera? And that's